leaving early, so I'm not worried about him.
I was just going to say, don't worry about him.
You look to respect my elder.
It's a rabble rouser. Okay, my name is Glenn Scholder. I'm a planning consultant, and what I do is help communities prepare strategic visions for their future. And that's really what we're working on here in Bristol right now, is what's called a Plan of Conservation and Development. It's really a plan for its future. So tonight's program, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you an overview of what is a Plan of Conservation and Development. We're going to talk about the exercises you guys participated in at the beginning when you came in. We're going to have open discussion, and the library agreed to let us use this room tonight. The only requirement is we've got to be out of here by 9. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting sometime at 8:30, 8:45, whatever, so we can try to be nice to them, okay? So that adjourn time is a hard rule. If we want to talk in the parking lot till midnight, we can, but we're going to be out of here, okay? So a Plan of Conservation and Development is a document to help guide a community into the future. It's really about the physical development of the community. And so in terms of preparing a plan, what we do is we look at where we are as a community, how we got here, but then we start thinking about where it is we want to be going in the future and then how we're going to get there. So that's really sort of the elements of the planning process, is we need to have a vision for where we want to go. We need to identify the steps that are going to help us get there. You guys may, when you were growing up, have had a chance to have read this book, Are You My Mother? But realistically, I think the interesting thing about this is to talk a little bit amongst us about what we think and ask ourselves, are you my plan? So each of us has probably had a chance in our lives to deal with plans on different levels. So we have sort of business plans in terms of where businesses are going to invest, the things that they're going to do. You know, a military plan or a battle plan in terms of how things are going to occur. We get schedules in different ways. We also have budgetary plans for money in terms of how we're going to spend money. And all of these are different types of plans. But they're kind of different, each of those, from what we're going to be doing. And so we'll talk about that just a little bit. So on the spectrum of plans, we have plans which are sort of suggestive and advisory. It would be a good idea if we're walking in a busy hallway if we stay to the right. All right? Because that way we don't interfere with people walking the other way. Are you required to do it? No. But it's just a good idea. Right? You cause less problems. At the other end of the spectrum, we have plans which are really command and control. So either in the military or in contracting, we have supervisory experience, which is, when I say jump, you have to say how high. The plan that we're doing right now on the part of the city doesn't really have the ability to exactly tell people what it is that they have to do. We're working on a plan which is really advisory in terms of identifying things that are going to be good for the city in the future. And the reason for that is there's different boards and entities in the city that have their own statutory authority. So the Planning Commission can't tell the council where to spend their money. The council can't tell the Planning Commission or the Zoning Commission what plans to approve. Everybody has their unique statutory authority. So our plan for the city of Bristol has to be advisory in terms of what we think is going to be good for the city as a whole. Now, there's some goals for our plan that I just want to kind of run through with you overall. When we start thinking about the time frame for the plan, it's not here and now, what should I have for dinner? But it is kind of more in the sense of what do I want to be when I grow up. So our plan for the future has to be long-term in terms of its thinking. And we're talking decades down the road. What sorts of things should the city be thinking about here overall? It also should be community-wide. We're not planning for one site, all right, or one situation or one neighborhood in the city. We're going to try to look at the city as a whole and try to decide what are the best long-term strategies really for the entire community in terms of what's going on or what's happening in the future. It's going to be comprehensive in nature. It's not going to deal with just one topic. The 12 boxes, which were on the back wall, you had a chance to put your planning points in, are the types of topics which are typically included in a Plan of Conservation and Development. So we're not going to focus on just one. We're really going to try to focus on all 12 and take really kind of a global view of the things that are affecting the city here overall. We want the plan to be strategic. We want it to be thinking long-term, planning what's best for the city on a large scale, why the city needs to start thinking about doing things. and focus on long-term strategies that make sense for us. We want the plan to be visionary, all right? There are many plans that are words on paper, and they really don't incite or inspire people. Anybody recognize what this is? You ever been to Walt Disney World? They have this thing which is at the 64 World's Fair called Carousel of Progress, and it really showed how an American family would live at different ages and stages. And really what we want to be doing is being a little bit visionary and thinking about where Bristol was, where it is, and where we think it's going to go in the future here overall. So a visionary plan is important to us. Anybody know what that game is on the left-hand side?
Whack-a-mole.
It's a carnival game called Whack-a-Mole, and a lot of communities end up being reactive to things that come along, and so people spend their time walking around trying to whack certain things that arise. And that's really not what planning is about. We want to try to develop operating principles that are going to guide the city in the future and provide guidance in terms of land use and activity. We don't want the plan to focus in on one outcome. What we really want to do is think about what are the best outcomes for the city that we would want to try to encourage, identify the things that would not produce good outcomes for the city, and try to avoid those. So the plan needs to be flexible to kind of address those situations, et cetera, in the future. And again, as I pointed out earlier, it needs to be advisory. The plan can't direct people that you have to do this or you have to do that. It's not a set of regulations. But it needs to be about coaching everybody on things that are going to produce good outcomes for the city here overall. Now, a plan also is going to cover some different topics. So one section of the plan is going to talk about issues in the city that the residents may feel, you may feel, it's important for us to protect in the future. So those can include things like natural resources, open space, parks, historic resources, the farms that are still left in Bristol, the overall character of the community. These are things as part of the planning process we may want to protect in the community. There's also a section of the plan that's all about how we may want to guide growth in the community in the future. What about downtown? What about the different neighborhoods? What about residential development citywide or business or economic development? And what about the issues of sustainability and resiliency? What are we going to be doing in the future in terms of being greener, in terms of those issues? Another section of the plan is about the types of services and facilities that the city should have in the future. What do we need in terms of community facilities? The library, our schools, city hall, fire, police. What do we need to have for those types of facilities and services? Transportation. Some people may have had a challenge getting here tonight because of some of the issues on the roadway. If we have an issue with our roadway system we need to be looking at. How about pedestrians or bicycle or transit? These are all issues for us to be thinking about as part of the future. But the goal for the plan is to balance all of those issues together. So it's not one flavor, it's just not one issue. It's really understanding what is the vision of the city, what to protect, how to guide growth, and then the services or facilities we want to provide in the future overall. So we had people participate in some exercises here at the beginning. So hopefully the lighting on here is good enough. Can you see the distribution of blue dots on here? So what do you think is there any story in that map in terms of blue dots?
All over.
Good. That was my goal as part of tonight's meeting, actually, was to try to get representation from different parts of Bristol. If all of the dots were from one area or one place, we might be concerned that we weren't going to be getting a comprehensive view. So for each of you, if there are issues which are unique to your area or neighborhood, if you make sure that you bring those up tonight, that would be helpful. But I'm pleased that there's not really any evidence of geographic bias in here, and I think that's a good sign. Okay? So the next thing that comes up is what we call crowds. So talk to me a little bit about the pattern or distribution of dots on that map. There's some aggregations going on there, dots. What are some of those things? Anybody got any ideas?
They're parks, basically.
Okay.
Facilities like that, you know.
Library.
Okay. What else?
Imagination Nation, museums.
So why, are there any common themes from what people have talked about and the dots? What are, is there a common thread about things that make us proud of our community?
What it provides the citizens.
I'm sorry?
The services it provides the citizens, other than, public works.
Yeah. These can also be things that sort of enhance our quality of life. That was the first thing that I thought of. Whether it's here at the library to rent a book or go to a park or whatever, these are places in the community that enhance my experience about living in Bristol. So as a result, these are things that make me proud of my community. Is there anything else we're missing on that map? I've had a chance to run this exercise in dozens of Connecticut municipalities. And the interesting thing that we've found about this exercise is that if you ask people, what do you want to encourage in your community? People sometimes have a hard time of figuring out how to answer that question. But if you ask people, what are you proud of in your community? People start to light up a little bit. And in work over the years, what people are really saying is that these are things that they really like or they enjoy, that contribute to the overall character of the community or the quality of life, are the things that make people feel good about their community. So if, in fact, we're going to look to enhance Bristol and the types of things that are happening here, understanding the things that make people feel good about their community is one of the things that's important for us to keep in mind here overall. So for everything that makes people proud, there's always something that makes people sorry. So talk to me.
No consistency there.
Yeah, very centralized there.
So, what we got going on here?
Route 6.
Now, what is about Route 6? Is it the roadway Route 6 or the uses along Route 6?
Everything about Route 6.
Congestion.
Mall site.
Improperly timed traffic lights.
So there's some things on here which aren't on Route 6. So this is all Route 6. So what's going on here?
West End.
Center
The West End and the mall, the empty, vacant mall site.
Okay. Is there anything big we're missing?
I don't know whether anybody put up there on Route 6, but the methadone clinic way out on Route 6 bothers a lot of people.
Yeah, it's still there.
So these are just as important for us to, and for you to share with us as the things that you're proud of in your community. Because there's the things that make you sorry about your community. In golf, we call these mulligans, or we call them do-overs, or other things like that. But the issue is, maybe these are situations we might want to try to avoid, or we might want to try to address in the future and try to do a better job on it. So again, sort of in our experience, these are things that either people, they don't like or they don't enjoy. They're irritants in the community. Every time they drive by, they say, I wish somebody would do something about that. So they try to detract from the character. They erode our quality of life. If we have guests or visitors in town, we may even try to avoid these areas so that they don't get a chance to see them, etc. Sometimes there are things that the community doesn't have, but people want. And so we can sort of address those, or again, things that make people feel bad about their community. So prouds are things that we would like to try to encourage in the community, and prouds are things, I think, that what we'd like to try to do, things we'd like to try to avoid in the community. So the timing couldn't be better. So Alan and Bob have been tabulating your planning points in the back of the room, and they have tabulated up the hottest topics, if you will, in terms of what's on your mind.
You got to question that. The planners are not good at mathematics.
Oh, you want to audit? You know.
My minor is math.
You said you were
Once
leaving
again,
early.
yeah,
Exactly
yeah.
when is that again?
That's not good with all that census data they gotta look at.
There you go. I have the chance here to actually look at this and see how people have voted. What do you think was the #1 issue here on this in terms of planning points?
Rockville Park.
I haven't heard it yet. Keep going. Nobody remembers where they put their planning points?
Housing?
No.
What were the topics?
And others?
I don't remember for a long time if you guys keep guessing.
I tried to put it all on sprawl, but I couldn't.
No.
It was
Interesting.
break it up.
We'll come back to that. The #1 issue, the one that got the most number of first place points, if you will, and the most points overall was business development. So we'll come back and talk about that in a little bit. What do you think was the second one? Any ideas? Second one was community character, and after that it drops off fairly significant, I guess I would say. So here's what we're going to do here tonight. Let me talk about this for a moment. This is a very interesting thing that you can't see the.
The plastic is kind
I'm so sorry. Is there a reflection of the plastic? All right, so let's do this. Let's just kick this off to the side because we'll look at this as we go. Thank you. So what we have is this situation here that each of you was put in a conundrum here tonight. There's 12 boxes that are part of the plan. You only have 5 bills. We're not making change. So each of you had to make a choice of what you thought was most important for the city overall. Okay? And place importance on those bills and talk about what's important to you. But what's interesting is that underneath all of this, because it was a group exercise, is that the planning points reveals what you as a small group in the community think are the most important issues. There's this wonderful book called The Wisdom of Crowds, and the basic concept is that each of us are biased in our own way. We don't think we're biased because that's who we are and the way we believe. But when you come to a situation like this and vote your planning points, each of your biases is overruled by somebody else's bias in a different direction. And what actually starts to emerge is the underlying issues which are important to the community overall. And so the book, The Wisdom of Crowds, is a way that they talk about these types of phenomena and situations here. So it's fair to say that we are somewhat representative of the city, not all 60,000 people, but we are somewhat representative of the city. And so these issues, in terms of the importance of economic development, of community character, and other things, are the first indication to us about the issues which are likely to be important as part of the planning process. So we've talked about what got the most planning points. And what we're going to do here for the next hour is we're going to talk about these topics one by one, why you think this is important for Bristol. We're going to go through as many topics as we can. And again, our goal is to be out of here before they turn the lights out on us here overall. Everybody's equal here tonight. There may be differing opinions in the room. Please treat other people with respect. If you have something that you'd like to say, just raise your hand. I'll recognize you. I would ask that you stand up, because when you stand up, you open your diaphragm and you project better, so people, I don't have to spend time sort of repeating what's going on here. But I think it's important for me to learn from you about the issues which you feel are important to the city overall. So let's start off with business development. Why did people put points in that box?
Taxes. Increases the tax base.
Okay. Anything else?
Sure.
Diversity to what's offered in the community.
Okay.
Brings outsiders to the city.
So why is it important to bring outsiders in?
Brings in money.
If we don't develop business, we lose people, and that causes ancillary problems with housing and the like.
So what you just described is sort of the economic cycle here overall, in terms of businesses and people and jobs and spending and tax base and services and quality of life, etc. And so what we really have here is a circle, in a sense, where people have identified that one of these elements is really, really important to them. So we've talked about really sort of the three things that business development could be important for. One of which is for, the tax base, which allows us to support goods and services in the community. Another one is jobs, so that people have gainful employment and earn money to spend, etc. And then the third thing, which I sort of dropped into here, is this concept of goods and services. That when we have businesses in the community, goods and services are available, so that if we want to go shopping for something, we don't have to go very far. We can find it locally. So of those three things, tax-based, jobs, or goods and services, which is the one you think is most important for the city overall?
Goods and services.
Why?
Well, this is the 21st century. Gas is $4 a gallon. I still can't travel from Bristol to the capital city after 5:30 at night unless I have a car. There are people who are working in this city who cannot get to their jobs unless somebody drives them. And you just said, I believe, that you need to get money into the city. That would be one way to do it.
Okay. Are there other thoughts? Yeah?
Jobs?
Why?
Because nothing drives the economy if you don't have jobs.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate with you a sec. There's jobs available elsewhere,
That's why people are moving out of Connecticut.
but there's other places in Connecticut where there are jobs. Why do we need them in Bristol?
Because aren't we trying to establish our own local community economically again? We're trying to reestablish a local economy.
Good. And I think that both of those things together, whether it's goods and services, businesses that pay taxes, and jobs that pay wages and pay taxes, they're also supporting the tax base. So all of these things are really sort of important to us. So we talked about Route 6, though. Okay, so Route 6 is probably, if we were to go and add up all of the taxes that are paid by businesses along Route 6, is probably a pretty big economic engine for Bristol. Is that fair to say? I mean, the industrial park is too, and there's other places, but is it fair to say Route 6 is probably an economic engine in Bristol?
Sure.
So why do we get a lot of red dots on there? What were the sorries about there?
They didn't create special development districts, which you do when you have a large tract of land like that. You don't just go plop things down willy-nilly on a straight line and create that nightmare of traffic. Besides, where were the representatives, the state representatives, when they were planning the busway? Why didn't they pull the busway all the way out here? And that would solve this gentleman's problem, where people could have gotten into the capital city. And if not that, who's dealing with Connecticut Transit so that they have express buses from Hartford into Bristol?
Okay,
They have them to Farmington, Simsbury, Avon, West Hartford. I mean,
Well, you're probably a couple of years ahead of, it took a long time to even get the busway to New Britain, never mind beyond New Britain. There's quite a lot of controversy on that. So
Well,
that's...
there's no record of anybody who represents Bristol having even been involved in any of the discussions. Do we have anybody here from the council tonight? I'd like to know that.
Mary.
Is there somebody?
I'm a
Okay,
council person.
you know what? This is not an interrogatory, all right? So,
No.
I understand.
Not a deposition either, but that's a reasonable precedent to ask who's here.
I understand, but do me a favor. I get to be the master of ceremonies, so the issue is, we're good.
One of the problems with Route 6 is it doesn't help create a community environment.
That's right.
The concept of walkability in a shopping area, the old Greek agoras, you don't have that because of Route 6.
Yeah. Now, I think the comment that was made too by the lady who spoke before you is important for us. We shouldn't beat ourselves up too much. When Route 6 really took off in terms of automobile-oriented development, that's what the country was doing. All right? Does everybody sort of remember? Well, not everybody's going to remember back to the 50s and 60s or whatever, but suburban shopping centers were the biggest thing going. And Bristol was right there on the front of that wave, surfing along. It was the best thing that happened for us.
But we weren't aware of the unintended consequences.
Thank you. Man. Okay, motion to adjourn? Because I think that is an important thing, is that in terms of planning for the future, we're going to want to make good choices. And I think the issue about transit for the future is something we need to be thinking about, but we also need to be thinking about possibility of unintended consequences. And if we overinvest in something, that may be kind of a risky investment for us from our land use perspective. So I think what we need to do is think about Route 6, now that we've had a chance to digest that for some time, is probably something we should try to look at to see how can we make Route 6 better.
I'd like to address the young lady's...
No, you address me and then everybody...
No, her concern about
Okay.
public transportation. From what I understand from Fast Track, next spring, we're supposed to have bus service from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight, 6 days a week, and 8 to 8 on Sunday. So that should help.
Okay, but you know what? It's not coming to Bristol, so...
Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, that's what he means, that's what he meant.
What they need is a commuter parking lot.
The fast track service is coming through New Britain to Bristol.
I saw the map. They have a map.
Awesome.
And that's what it's supposed to be.
All right. In that case, I take back everything I just said, because I had not heard that, and I think that is huge for us, because we need to figure out ways to get us.
Has bus service to Fast Track, isn't it? Yeah, bus service to Fast Track. Fast Track in the Britain.
So if we were going to do Route 6 over again, what are some of the changes you might make this time around?
Limit
Flyover and sidewalks.
limit curb.
I noticed that, I heard the comment about sidewalks. Sidewalks are kind of hit or miss along Route 6. There are places I do see people walk, and in other places not so much. But not having sidewalks means it's certainly challenging for people to walk there. Are there other issues along Route 6 that we might try to address?
Yeah, it's the traffic in between Stafford and the Farmington line that needs to be more than just one lane in each direction.
So actually, that's not interesting. There are some other one-lane segments, but realistically, most of Route 6 east of downtown is two, except for that one section that sort of goes over the hill just past Bristol Commons. Then it's 2-lane. Gets to 1 lane as you go up the next hill. And then
But
it's...
if you go there on like a Saturday or Sunday, it's impossible to drive.
Yeah, it really is the western section that's worse.
Yeah.
I mean,
Businesses
eastern
dump
section.
directly in, parking lots dump directly into Route 6.
So is the congestion along Route 6 then a problem of just too much volume for the number of lanes, or is it because the intersections, there's not enough turning lanes? What's...
The capacity of the road when it was built, obviously, is far exceeded
Yep.
the current volume of traffic. You see that everywhere. It was a godsend when it was built, now it's a lot better. And you don't have the land space to expand those things.
Okay?
With Route 6, it evolved and it wasn't planned. And you have an awful lot of situations that they knew what was going to happen. They might have arranged some of the traffic a little different.
Yeah, it's the planner's lament. It's sort of, if I knew then what I know now, things might have been differently.
If there could be a way to combine some of the parking lots, right now, each business has its own parking lot. And each one, they're about 50 feet apart, and each one only, you park there if you're going to that store. So for example, if I want to go to Pier 1 Imports, and then I want to go to Benjamin Moore Paint, I have to park at Pier 1, buy my stuff, get in the car, drive 50 feet down the road, and pull into the next parking lot there. And with so many entrances and exits everywhere.
That could take you 20 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, from.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the problem ends up being that it's not uncommon in a situation like this. People plan out their trips and say, okay, first thing I'm going to do is travel east on the right-hand side, do a U at the other end, and do my trips coming back. So it's not always a logical sequence, but when you start realizing the difficulty in terms of traffic, it can in fact be the best way. Are there other issues related to business development we want to talk about or focus on? Do you think if I reflected the planning commission that you've told me what the planning commission needs to be thinking about?
With the new business development, you have to create it so that there are feet on the street, not all cars.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes a community where people can stop, have some benches, some, you know, tables or something where people can stop and engage with their fellow citizens.
Okay, so now I'm going to play a game with you guys a little bit. I call it the verb game. So if we could summarize tonight's meeting in terms of economic development, what verb would you want to put on front of that? What should our goal or vision be for the future in Bristol for economic development?
Action.
Well, okay, so we asked you for a different verb, because if I was going to say we should action economic development, that's probably not going to get across what it is we want to do. Anybody got a verb that you think people might agree to?
Listen.
We should listen to economic development.
Promote.
Does that work?
Yep. Promote works.
So one of the strategies of the city was to promote our number, let's say it could even be our number one strategy, right, based on the planning points? Number one strategy, City of Bristol, we should promote economic development. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, it's a good starting point for us. What's number two on our list? You guys are all going to say, I can't read it because it's glistening.
The second choice was community character.
Community character, there you go. So now community character means different things to different people. So why did you put your planning points in there?
I think one of the reasons why that's put up there is a lot of people are not aware of all the good things that are going on in this community and create the character that we do have.
Okay. Others?
There should be some kind of continuity as to the facades of the structures. We see in other communities over in Westfield, up there in Farmington. I mean, you know, if it's a McDonald's, it doesn't necessarily have to, quote unquote, stick out looking so much like a McDonald's. If it's a Friendly's, if it's a store, you know, there's ways they can build those and still gain the support of the community by making it look a little bit more, well, whatever you want, whether you want modern, historic. I think Bristol lends itself to kind of a more historic look.
Yep. So you kind of touched on 2 points there I just wanted to talk about for a minute, because in terms of the continuity of facades on structures, there's two ways that could occur. And some of the communities you mentioned use both of these programs. So one is a facade renovation program. And so there are funding available to help people fix up their buildings and improve the facade. And that deals with existing buildings. And then the second part that some communities do is a design review process, which is when a new building is proposed, that there's a design review to try to encourage that building to fit in better to the character of the community, so that, you know, instead of a glass modern building, maybe there is something that's a little bit more historic. How do people feel about those concepts? These are what other communities might be thinking about doing. How do you feel about those?
We in Bristol haven't done enough of it.
Other communities that have been successful have brought in a developer who has taken, say, an existing area and re-facaded it or whatever, however you want to call it. You know, it's when you get these singular people acting in and alone that you create what you end up with on Route 6. Most towns have special development districts that are created by the town council. And within those certain areas, you can do only certain things. I mean, you have to get control on what's going on.
Well, we do, and I think the part of the whole planning process is to start talking about these issues in terms of what the city can and should be doing in these sort of different areas. Have we covered the gamut of, go ahead?
When I think of community character, I really don't think of it in terms that have just been discussed. I think the community character of Bristol is that we are a sports-oriented community, home of ESPN. And I think that that's one of the drawing points, certainly for jobs and promoting economic development, is the growth.
May I have your attention, please? The library will close in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Please bring all the items you want to check out.
You get locked in till tomorrow.
Again, the library will close in 10 minutes. Please bring all the items you want to check out.
We're good till 9 o'clock.
As long as we're under by 9, we're good.
We're good till 9 o'clock.
I think an interesting thing to know, going to this gentleman's point, is to get a feeling as a mother of an ESPN employee as to how many of those employees actually live here in town or live in Farmington, in West Hartford, and if not, if they live here, where do they go to enjoy their, social activity, their other types of activity?
Yeah.
There have to be reasons for them to want to stay here and live here, and that's what I want.
Yeah.
It's a huge group of people. You have to take advantage of it.
Yeah, there's no question that we do. But I think the interesting thing here is that character is such a fascinating topic as part of the plan, because we've touched on sort of 3 different issues. We talked, first of all, about sort of a physical issue in terms of facades and structures. We talked a little bit on sort of an emotional issue, is that people aren't aware of the activities of the character that we do have. In other words, the sort of special feeling that we have in Bristol. And then we touched on sort of a perception issue about, the home of a sports-oriented community. So character covers all sorts of different bases for people. It's not just the physical stuff, but it's also these sort of emotional things that, people put proud and sorries on, or things like that. So the question, in a sense, is how do we address these as part of the plan? But I think it's fair to say that if we were going to add a verb to this, what do you think a verb could be for character?
Enhance.
Does that work for people?
I didn't hear it.
Enhance.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. What was topic number 3? Looked like it was walking, biking, bus. And what I found fascinating here was the amount of drop. So clear leader, clear second place, but look at all the ones that we've got which are really sort of close to each other. So let's talk about those 3 next, but the next one was walking, biking, bus. So why did people put planning points in that?
Because there's not a lot of it you can do in Bristol. I think as some of the points we've made before, if you want to go shopping today and you go down Route 6, you have to get in your car. If you leave your car at Pier 1 to walk over to Benjamin Moore, they're going to tow you if you're not fast enough. So you really can't walk between a lot of places. You can't do, we do have buses back and forth to Hartford during the rush hours right now, and that will be expanding with the fast track, which I think will be helpful. But those are both on, you've got one lot on Lake Avenue and one lot on Todd Street. So there's nothing really on the other side, on the Route 6 side, really.
Yeah.
I once, just for laughs, I once went into the website and figured out if I wanted to take a bus to West Farms Mall, it's probably like a half-hour drive, 2.5 hours.
Wow.
I gotta park somewhere on Route 6, take the bus down to Tunsis, over to Farmington, Connecticut, and all around before I finally get to West Farms.
And it's interesting because for many years, bus has not been big on our radar screen, but actually, it's the type of thing that more and more people are paying attention to. You remember the gas shock we had a couple of years ago when gas was still $4 a gallon, but when it went to $4 for the first time, the amount of ridership and stuff in Connecticut really ramped up at that point in time. So transit is something that's just a gas hike away from being really relevant to people. So it is the type of thing that we really sort of need to think about.
But I think, too, once you've used it, you find you're less stressed because you're not fighting the traffic twice a day for 40 minutes. I've taken whole classes just studying on the bus rides. So once you've done it a couple of times and you realize you get to work and you have no stress. You get home, you
Yep.
got no stress.
Yeah.
Then you start to realize.
So the issue...
Why you're taking the bus, it's because we don't have here in town what you want to get to.
That's part of it.
That could be.
Well, to get
If
back
you had
to biking, you need to create bike lanes. You need to strip them out. You need to put the white strips like other communities do, and then surrounding that, you have to create biking activities. There was one down there in West Hartford that covered everybody from 5 years old up to 90.
So let's back up so that I can keep these straight in my mind. So in terms of walking, it seems to me that in and near the downtown area, we got a pretty good array of sidewalks. Is everybody with me on that? But if I wanted to go Route 6 or some of these other areas, the sidewalks peter out, they're non-existent. So in a sense, we've kind of got, I'm going to call it kind of a central core, and after that it's spotty. Is everybody with me on that? Is that fair? Okay, bicycles on the other hand, I mean, are there any, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was thinking, to me, buses, bikes, busways. That strikes me as buses being your commercial vehicle where you're going to work, you're going shopping. To me, when somebody says biking, yes, you want the roadways to be marked for biking safety, but that's more relaxing. But, not too many people really going to take their bike from Bristol to Hartford to go to work. In today's day and age or in the future. But I see it as a relaxing, so that, it's not job related, but like a quality of life. Walkways are pathways that you can do a trail. I mean, other than up here going into the road, what's in place there?
Yeah.
Sessions?
Huh?
Sessions Woods?
Sessions Woods, yeah. You just roll around it.
Yeah.
As long as you're not afraid of bears.
State Senator from
Yeah.
West Hartford bikes to work. So, if you're going to talk,
That's at the Capitol.
bike the bike.
Yeah, you can't get anywhere to ride a bike
People who are going
in
to
town.
set examples
I agree.
for the community. This is what they're elected for, to set examples.
Does anybody in the room bike? Did you bike in Bristol? Did you bike in Bristol?
I haven't biked in a few years, but I used to bike on the roads in Bristol. That's why I haven't.
So I think there's our sense right there, if you will, that biking at this point in time, and the reason that these three things are grouped together is because vehicular circulation has been the dominant thought process in our thinking for decades. And so it used to be, if you look back at old city plans and other plans, the issue was pedestrians and bicycles and transit rarely didn't come up. Everybody was thinking about how do we get vehicles to move around. And people are now starting to realize that people want to walk, okay? People do actually are more interested in riding bikes. And in terms of transit, the way that for us to have a safety net in terms of transportation for people to be able to get around is to have some sort of connectivity to the bus system. So the fact that that ended up number 3 on our list, I think, is kind of an important thought process here overall. If you were going to order those or sequence those for me in terms of a priority for the plan, how would it be? Which comes first? Walking, biking, or bus?
Walking.
Bus.
Okay? Now I'm going to ask you for a verb. What do we got for a verb?
Encourage.
Okay? What's our next thought? Let's go to open space. So why do people put planning points in open space?
Be able to hear the birds.
No, I put mine there because I'm afraid we'll lose it.
Many communities have done that. They've developed, they leave open space, and later they go back to grab it. So you have to make it open space forever.
Does Bristol have enough open space today?
Depends who you ask.
I think there's sufficient open space.
challenge I often find with open space is that people define it differently. So that for some communities, if you drive through a rural community, you might say to yourself, look at all of this open space. But in fact, it's not really open space. It's somebody's land which isn't developed yet. Okay? So the challenge in a community is to say, in Bristol, we have certain areas which we have preserved as parks. And Bristol's got some beautiful parks. Okay? And there's other areas which are topographically challenging, or they are private open space or whatever, but not necessarily preserved. So the question in a sense is, how do we define open space, and then what do we do about it? So let me ask you a question right off the bat. What's our verb here?
I have a question or a remark to make about the open space. The DEP in Connecticut actually dictates that privately owned land is open space. If it's owned by a nonprofit or a land trust, it's included as open space. Am I incorrect?
Well, it can be. I mean, there's different taxation programs and other stuff like that. So the definition of the state definition of open space is so broad, though, that it includes undeveloped land, which means that it's almost anything which isn't developed can fall under the state definition. So it seems to me that one of the things I think for us as part of our city plan to understand and focus on is
the open space. I think we'd be referring to the owned, publicly owned.
There you go.
Right. I mean, that, which the city that has, municipality has some exercise over, as opposed to the land trusts are great. You go to the Clean Refuge, but they can still close the gate, and it's no longer open.
Okay, so let's all agree that if it's publicly owned open space, we feel pretty comfortable that that's going to be open space for us, right? Everybody?
Not forever.
No.
Public? Why not?
Vote for that one.
Why not?
Changes in a lot of communities.
Sure.
Because?
At West Hartford, they built that Blueback Square. They deemed open space across the street from the police department where the state cut through Memorial Road, which, by the way, was in the works for like 10 or 12 years, and every representative knew it. Now they're building a hotel on it.
Over in Pine Lake area in Bristol, there was conservation area. That used to be open space, and now there's a soccer field on it, and started to develop in Bristol over off of Pine Lake, where the challenge area is. That used to be designated open space at one point in time. Now the soccer field's over there, which, I mean, it's publicly owned. Are you gonna? But it's also partly parking lot. So I mean, parking lot open space?
So
No.
we're not really sort of splitting hairs on the definition of open space. So my question back is, so what's our verb? What's our vision?
Define open space.
Define, maintain, preserve,
Improve.
improve.
A lot of our open space, taking the hoppers as an example, it's great that it's there, it's important that we preserve it, but it's almost impossible to walk it unless you've got waders on. I've tried.
And good luck too in the silt.
First weekend in June is usually Athletic Trail Days.
I try to walk from Chippens Hill
So what's our
through the
verb?
hoppers.
Right, but
I don't have a verb yet.
Okay, so what did you just write down?
I mean, some of the words that were thrown out were define and improve. but
There's
I don't
audience
think-
participation
Guys,
for everybody.
do me a
Good
favor.
job.
Guys,
Sorry.
because otherwise everybody in the room starts getting disengaged, and that's probably not good. So I'm looking for a verb for open space, and it's interesting that this showed up as the number 4 issue on our list. We don't have a verb yet. We're still down, pardon the pun, in the weeds, arguing about open space and what's open space, but we don't really have, what's our goal? What are we going to try to accomplish with open space?
Secure it.
What?
Secure it.
See, I'm not wild. I would not be a big advocate for secure, because secure,
You can have development with open space.
and it relies on
All over the
define.
state. You can
So
be
if
smart
I
with
said we're going to be 30, 40 years in the future, what do you hope we will have accomplished through an open space program? What is that?
place for the community to get together. For instance, when they build this down in downtown there, they can have a square just like the Lubac Square, where they have concerts and all sorts of things for the entire community. That's open space. I mean, I'm not looking for, field of dreams here, although in some respects, I guess it is.
Well, this is interesting. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do here. We're going to move on. And I wrote down here in the margin, don't have a verb. And I think that's fascinating, and it's something for us to explore as part of the planning process, is what are the underlying issues in the community and open space, because it sounds like it's a lack of comfort that if something is preserved, or a lack of vision about what we want to preserve, or a lack of definition about what we have. So this is something that sounds to me like I need to dig into and try to understand better so that we get to, it's important to people. It's number 4 on our list, but we don't know what we want to do about it yet. We're concerned about it, we put our points in there, but we don't have a verb.
At a minimum, we want to retain what we have. I mean, I think a lot of people want their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren to be able to, some words, see nature, not have house upon house upon house upon business, but just a place where you can go and relax and be free.
So I'm going to throw out something just as food for thought, because I look at open space not just for our use, but I really don't care if people walk Congress at any point in the year. I think it's great space to save, and I would love not to have people trudging all over it. So I look at open space as truly, it's just not for our use sometimes. Just a food for thought. As we
No, and I think
go deeper into this topic.
This is the thing about open space. I think open space is such a challenging term because open space should have another word associated with it. So you just described a nature preserve, which is really not available for public. You've talked about passive open space, which is a place that you could go walk in your waders or whatever. And there's also active open space, which is places where you have soccer fields and other things like that. So the issue is everybody loves open space, but if we can't come together and agree on what our vision is, then we're always going to be fighting about open space opportunities that do come up. So this is actually a good example of where, as part of a plan, we can actually start. The fact that we're not able to sort of come to a verb is the first indication where we could go from here. All right, let's move on to the next one, which was community structure. So why did people put their points in community structure?
Structure.
Well, what else did it say, Bob or Alan? Can you go back and find that box and read off? Because it had said a couple of things on the front of it. So I apologize. Community structure is my planning geek expression.
Sprawl development. Sprawl development.
Pardon me?
What are you trying to say?
I'm just going to read off the box what it said.
Town center, neighborhood strip development, sprawl development.
Okay. So why do people put planning points in community structure?
I know I arrived late, sorry, but my question is there a point, I know I missed the whole exercise, but in discussing how we can stop and block the Depot Square public taxpayer-funded development, even though Renaissance said they weren't going to use taxpayer dollars to...
That's probably something for a different venue. In other words, did you see the PowerPoint that we went through?
No, sadly, I had to work before.
That's okay,
I got
sure. Thanks for coming anyway. But as part of the PowerPoint, we kind of talked about the fact that the plan is really not about one topic or one issue, but it's going to be taking this global view. So what you've described is something that could be very important for the city, but it's kind of a here and now issue. And we're going to be looking further down the road and talking about these kinds of situations. It turned out business development was sort of our #1 issue, if you will, in terms of people identified it, and it could be interpreted that way.
An issue to not use taxpayer money for it?
That's probably more detailed than we're going to get into. So I'm sorry if this isn't the best venue for you for that, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
For community structure, I think what I was thinking was, in especially some of the older neighborhoods, you will have a mix of multifamily houses, single-family houses, little things that look like they might be stores, kind of an old, I want to say, mini neighborhood within a neighborhood type of thing.
Like mixed,
Yeah,
like mixed use.
right.
I say Neighborhood created an environment where people like to be there.
But you don't have, it's very, I won't say it's rare, and maybe it's more on the Route 6 side, I don't live over that way, where you see, here's the neighborhoods of all the single-family homes, and here's a place where you can do your shopping. Everything's drawn to Route 6 because that is where we shop right now. And then the neighborhoods seem to be, in some ways, kind of a patchwork. And if there was a way to, like if you go into West Hartford, from Lubac Square to Hartford, the majority of it is multifamily homes. You go over towards the Elmwood side, and you do get a mixed area. Then you go towards the West Hartford Reservoir, it's single family. All of the lots are a quarter acre or more. It's, in Bristol, you'll see a couple houses on an eighth of an acre, and then a couple on an acre. It's all mixed. It's not, it doesn't seem to flow in my mind.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's too late to change all of that. What you have to do is develop it and make the best out of it. That's like clearing the entire community, you know what I mean? West Hartford, you've got the Park Road Association, Bishop's Corner, you have the Bishop's Corner Association.